The story begins on Isla Nublar, 120 miles west of Costa Rica. Jurassic Park rangers, guns in hand, watch intently for trees falling in the jungle. When a vehicle brings up a cage, their leader, Robert Muldoon, guides them. The pushers, momentarily startled by a noise inside, carry out their task. When one of them opens the cage door, the cage shakes, and the man falls to the ground. He is pulled inside. Robert, trying to save him, tells the other men to use their tasers and comes eye to eye with the creature, but their efforts are futile. We go to the Mano de Dios amber mine in the Dominican Republic. Pulled by two men on a river raft, Donald Gennaro is greeted by Juan Rostaño, who is waiting for him. We learn that Donald, unfamiliar with the environment, is the lawyer of John Hammond, the owner of Jurassic Park, and has come for the lawsuit of the worker who suffered the accident. Meanwhile, Juan is informed and goes to see a huge mosquito inside a chunk of amber found during excavations deep within the mine. In the Badlands, near Snakewater, Montana, we watch a group of diggers excavating and uncovering a dinosaur skeleton. Doctors Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler are called in. After the volunteers drill into the ground with a tool, they observe the dinosaur skeleton generated on the computer. Alan and Ellie declare it to be a velociraptor, 5 or 6 feet high and 9 feet long. When Alan points to the half-moon-shaped bone in the wrist and remarks that it's no wonder these creatures learned to fly, he explains to the laughing volunteers, stating that dinosaurs may have more in common with present-day birds than reptiles, and lists several characteristic features of their skeletons. When a child points out that the velociraptor doesn't look scary, that it resembles a turkey, Alan explains that the stationary tactic used to evade a T-Rex wouldn't work on them. Because they are pack hunters, their attacks can come from all sides, and they tear their prey apart with their 6-inch retractable claws, devouring it alive.
On the way back with Ellie, Alan tells her he dislikes children and lists their bad traits. Seeing a helicopter landing in the area that will cause damage, he rushes there, tells everyone to protect the excavation sites, and goes to talk to the person who owns the helicopter, only to discover it's their sponsor, John Hammond. John tells him and Ellie, who arrives later, that he owns an island off the coast of Costa Rica and has a biological project that would be of particular interest to children. However, because his investors value outside expert opinions, he wants the best person in the field, Alan, to sign off on the park. When Alan asks what kind of park it is, Alan says right up your alley and invites him and Ellie to visit the park for the weekend. Alan says they found a new skeleton and says the timing is bad, but when he hears John will sponsor them for another 3 years, he accepts it and celebrates with Ellie. In San Jose, Costa Rica, Louis Dodgson meets Dennis Nedry, who is waiting for him. He tells him not to shout his name in public, but Dennis ignores him. Louis gives him a bag of money for the viable embryos he'll bring, along with a bottle of shaving cream to carry them in. Dennis responds enthusiastically, tells him the boat must be ready on time, and makes him foot the bill. In the helicopter heading towards the island, Dr. Ian Malcolm meets Alan and Ellie. John tells them about Ian, and they joke around. They're also accompanied by lawyer Donald. The helicopter continues its progress, eventually reaching the island. They pass through valleys, then begin their descent near a waterfall. While each person buckles up, Alan struggles and eventually has to do it his own way. They land and continue their journey in the cars. Meanwhile, Donald speaks to John, reminding him that this 48-hour investigation is crucial for the park's future, but John assures him that everything is fine. The cars finally stop, and Alan can't believe what he sees and turns Ellie's head in that direction. A giant brachiosaurus walks before them. They get out of their vehicles in awe and walk towards it. Ian is also surprised, curses by saying that John finally did it. Donald forgets all his anxiety. The dinosaur stands on 2 legs and feeds from the treetops. Alan and Ellie struggle to stand when they hear from Hammond that there's even a T-Rex in Jurassic Park. They can't believe the reality of the sight before them.
John continues their journey by vehicle and takes them to the visitor center. They pass by the massive skeleton in the lobby and proceed to a conference room. John speaks to himself on screen and takes a sample of his own blood to replicate himself. As the doctors question the feasibility of this procedure among themselves, John's DNA begins to speak, explaining that mosquitoes that bit dinosaurs in ancient times landed on tree branches and became trapped in the sap. It says that tree sap fossilized over time, that it was discovered through mining, and that all the DNA in the blood was extracted using scientific methods. We learn that it has a very long code component and that they filled in the gaps using frog DNA. We see a dinosaur hatch from the egg. John announces that music will start at this point and the tour will continue, then pauses the video.
The room they were sitting in rotates, and they watch the real Jurassic Park employees in action. Alan and Ellie impatiently ask questions and want to go there, so they lift the safety bar. They see a robotic arm turning over dinosaur eggs. Henry, who works there, arrives, and John is excited to see one of the eggs about to give birth. The little dinosaur pops her head out, and John helps her. We learn that the imprint on the first living creature they encounter. Henry says that they control the birth of all dinosaurs on the island so that they are born as female. Ian counters this, claiming that life will always find a way and that births in those living creatures can occur in any way. When Alan nervously asks what species of baby he's holding, he learns that it's a velociraptor. John tells Alan he's prepared lunch for them, but Alan ignores him and follows the steer they're carrying to feed the dinosaur with. All that's heard are the dinosaur's sounds, its devouring of the animal, and the movement of the surrounding bushes. Meanwhile, Robert arrives and meets them. We learn that the dinosaurs grow to a lethal stage within 8 months, can run at the speed of a cheetah, can jump very well, and demonstrate extreme intelligence. Robert specifically mentions that the largest of them killed most of the others and led the rest, had them attack different parts of the fence each time to test the weak spots. They go out to eat, and Donald enthusiastically talks about the profits they'll make from this place. Ian counters that it's very dangerous, that the genetic power is so strong that it's dangerous to manipulate it in this way. Donald tells him he wouldn't object if the island were filled with endangered condors, but Ian argues that's different. Ellie asks how they can recreate an extinct ecosystem, noting that even the island's plants have been carefully selected, but these creatures will defend themselves at all costs. John then turns to Alan, hoping he'll support him, but he doesn't get the positive response he's looking for. He receives news from his employee, takes everyone out, and catches up with his grandchildren, who have come to take the first tour of the park. John explains that the vehicles they'll take are driverless, but they run on rails, powered by electricity and controlled by a screen. Tim, one of John's grandchildren, tells Alan that he's read his book and begins asking questions. Alan, who dislikes children, ignores him and tries to walk away, eventually gets him into the other vehicle. But later, his sister comes to him. Robert tells John that they've noticed a tropical storm coming, but that it could swing south like the last one. John asks Ray, one of the employees, to start the tour program. After a few adjustments, the vehicles begin to move. They initially enter through the massive Jurassic Park gates. Then, accompanied by the narration of Richard Kimbley, a renowned voice actor and actor of the era, they learn that a herd of Dilophosaurus will appear on their right, and they eagerly look for it. We learn that they spit venom at their prey, causing blindness and paralysis. Despite their careful search, they can't see them. Ray notices something strange about the battery of cars. When John asks how such a thing could happen, Dennis complains about his salary and the intensity of his work. John doesn't want to hear these excuses. While Ray and Dennis argue, Robert silences them. The vehicles approach the Tyrannosaurus paddock. They look around. The guards lure a sheep to the T-Rex to draw it out. After a long wait, they become increasingly impatient, but the dinosaur doesn't appear, and the cars continue on their way. As they proceed, Ian mentions chaos theory, explaining that dinosaurs are unpredictable too. He gives the butterfly effect as an example to further explain. He conducts a small experiment showing that a drop of water poured onto Ellie's hand flows in a different direction each time. Meanwhile, getting impatient, Alan gets out of the car, followed by Ellie. John demands that the tour program be stopped immediately. Meanwhile, Dennis, who has the transport device hidden in shaving cream on his desk, watches the embryo cold storage through cameras. As Alan moves forward, Tim asks more questions, making him uncomfortable, which Ellie enjoys. As if that weren't enough, he also has to care for Lex. They then see a tranquilized Triceratops, which is sick, and they surround her with admiration, touching her, savoring the moment. Ellie finds microvesicles in her mouth. She learns that incompatible abnormalities appear in her body every 6 weeks. While Alan listens to her breathing, Ellie examines her, explaining that the problem is pharmacological, stemming from the surrounding plants, and that they need to analyze her droppings. Robert tells John that the storm hasn't changed direction and they have to cancel the tour. John curses angrily as Ray announces this to everyone. Ian admires the massive piece of shit and then goes to Ellie, who is examining it. She says, surprised, that she couldn't find any plant residue in the dinosaur's dung and begins to think to herself. Meanwhile, Dennis is quickly working on his computer. When Donald sees lightning strikes, he tells the others they must leave. Ellie says she wants to stay with the dinosaur a little longer to help with the treatment and leaves the others.
The storm deepens, and Dennis asks one of the bot staff for another 20 minutes to run the final test, but he doesn't get a definitive answer. John is dissatisfied that today's round didn't go as he thought it would. Dennis tells them he's going to the machine to get something to eat and that he's finished debugging the phones, but that the process could take up to 20 more minutes and that some security systems might be disabled for a while. His demeanor is suspicious enough, then he sets the computer's countdown with his own clock. As they drive away in their vehicle, Alan and Ian talk about children and family life. Dennis waits for the camera to go offline and then goes inside. John and Ray, however, are fine with this temporal offline, as Dennis warned them about it. He quickly enters the storage area, lifts the lids, puts the embryo samples he can into the shaving foam container, and exits. Meanwhile, the vehicles stop, and headquarters begins receiving a warning that all the fences in the park are disabled. When Dennis reaches the gate in his vehicle, he manually opens it and continues on his way. Ray, John, and Robert look at Dennis's computer and see that he has disabled all the fences except those for the raptors. Dennis goes through another gate but crashes because he can't see ahead on the rainy road. We see the photo of Oppenheimer that Dennis has taped to his desk. Ray tries to access his computer, but to no avail. When he tries to call outside, he finds the phones are also dead.
Alan discovers the radio in the other vehicle isn't working either and returns to Ian. The boys in the same vehicle with Donald joke around. Meanwhile, Tim hears a deep thud and focuses on the water in glass. Hearing the sounds grow louder, Donald tries to understand what's happening. They look around and see the goat missing. At that moment, a piece of the goat falls onto the car. The giant T-Rex's claws revealed, followed by its head, which swallows its food. Donald runs away in fear and gets into the bathroom. Alan and Ian try to understand what's happening. The wires snap and the dinosaur circles the vehicles. Alan says they must stay still because its vision is based on movement. T-Rex moves toward the light the children have turned on. Lex points it to another direction at the last moment, but Tim closes the door, attracting the dinosaur's attention. The creature looks at them, hoping to see movement, and roars in anger. They try to turn off the flashlight's glowing light, but they only attract more attention, and T-Rex begins to attack them. Unable to clear the roof, it flips the vehicle over and begins eating from underneath. He climbs onto it and begins to sink the vehicle into the ground. Alan, lighting a flare, attracts the T-Rex's attention, throwing it in a different direction to divert it. However, Ian also lights a flare, attracting the dinosaur to himself, and tells Alan to take the children away. Although the T-Rex can't catch Ian, it throws him into a corner and destroys the bathroom walls, revealing Donald. It quickly grabs the trembling man in its mouth and devours him. Alan, who tries to get the children out, manages to save Lex first, but when he hears the girl screaming, he silences her and tells her to stay still. The T-Rex can't see them, but remembering its prey inside, it begins to turn the vehicle. Alan and Lex are cornered and begin to descend with the help of a rope. As they reach the halfway point, they see the vehicle about to crash down on them and, swinging, manage to grab onto the other rope at the last moment. The T-Rex roars with anger. Ray, examining Dennis's code, reveals that over 2 million pieces of data will need to be analyzed. John assigns Robert to rescue his grandchildren, and Ellie wants to go with him. Ray tells John they need Dennis to get Jurassic Park back online. Meanwhile, struggling through the rainy, muddy road, Dennis has another accident. Seeing his path, he tries to pull the tow rope, but slips and loses his glasses. He manages to get up and wraps the rope around a tree. A Dilophosaurus starts following him. Dennis tries to deceive him with a tree branch, but fails. He struggles to return to his car, but as he climbs up, the Dilophosaurus appears behind him, reveals its brightly colored fan around its neck, hisses, and shoots venom into Dennis's face, knocking him to the ground. The shaving cream bottle gets in the water. Dennis gets back to his feet and gets back into the car, but the dinosaur appears next to him and begins attacking. Alan and Lex finally reach the ground, and Alan looks up and calls out to Tim, who's in the vehicle that's stuck in trees. After calming Lex and telling her to stay put, he goes to help Tim and begins climbing the tree. When he reaches the vehicle, he sees the boy sitting motionless with fear. He pulls him out and tells him not to look down, persuading him to climb down. But the vehicle continues to fall, breaking branches and chasing them. Alan and Tim accelerate their descent even further, and when they reach the ground, they find themselves back inside the overturned vehicle. Arriving there, Ellie and Robert search for the others and find one of the vehicles missing. Looking around, they find Ian lying injured on the ground. They hear the dinosaurs roar nearby and quickly carry him to the vehicle. Meanwhile, Ellie follows the tracks and finds the other vehicle, but the others are not inside, having escaped on foot. Sensing the rumbling sound getting closer, Ian calls the others and tells them to get in. Robert quickly starts the vehicle and drives off. T-Rex is chasing them, and just as it's about to catch them, it crashes into a tree stump. It tries to overturn the vehicle, but Robert accelerates even further, exceeding the dinosaur's speed, and they manage to escape. Alan, Tim, and Lex are startled by the dinosaur roars they hear. They climb a large nearby tree and watch the Brachiosaurus. Alan interprets their sounds as singing and manages to attract their attention by singing along, but since they eat only vegetables, they are in no danger. The children sit at the top of the tree, hugging Alan, while he throws away the dinosaur claw that had been left in his pocket. Ellie approaches John, who is sitting alone eating ice cream. She tells him she's given Ian morphine and that he's doing well for the moment. John's thoughts are on his grandchildren, and he commiserates with Ellie, saying he'll fix the park's mistakes as soon as possible, but this only angers her further, saying there's no way a place like this can be controlled. While Alan and the children are sleeping, a baby Brachiosaurus comes to them, but it doesn't hurt them, only eating the surrounding vegetation. Lex is initially afraid, but Alan grabs a twig and tries to feed it. He and Tim pet it, and when Lex musters up the courage to do so, the Brachiosaurus sneezes on her. As the three continue their journey through the forest, Alan finds dinosaur eggs at the base of a tree and examines them with both awe and wonder. Tim says he thought all the dinosaurs on the island were female, and Alan recalls the film explaining that they used frog DNA and that some frogs are known to change sex in single-sex environments. He declares that Ian was right, life always finds a way, and they all look at the footprints of the baby dinosaurs. John embraces the idea that they can't erase Dennis's damage because they can't find his code. However, they can restore the entire system to its original state by shutting it down and rebooting. Ray finds this idea risky because he warns they could lose all their data. Robert and Ray debate whether they could use the lysine contingency, the genetic alteration that Henry put into the dinosaur genome that will create a fault in their metabolism, eventually killing them, but John refuses this and demands they shut it down. Ray shuts down and restarts the system, using the keys one by one. When he excitedly goes to check the computer, he says that it worked, but that they need to check the circuit breakers that may have been tripped in order to reactivate the lights, phones, and security doors, and goes to the maintenance shed at the end of the compound for this. As Alan and the children head up a hill, they witness a herd of Gallimimus passing in front of them. The herd then suddenly changes direction and charges toward them. They quickly run back and hide behind a tree stump. As they begin to watch the herd, they see a T-Rex suddenly appear, hunting one of the Gallimimus. Alan takes the children away and they flee. Ellie says that a lot of time has passed since Ray left and says she'll follow him. Robert says he'll go with him and retrieves a gun from the security storage. John says he'll guide them by looking at the map and using the walkie-talkie Ellie gives him. Robert and Ellie head outside and see that the raptor fences have been disabled due to the shutdown and the herd has left. They continue forward and Ellie says she sees the shed, but Robert tells her they're being hunted right now and that he can distract the dinosaur, yelling for Ellie to run. After running in fear and panic, Ellie reaches the shed and calls out to John on the walkie-talkie, asking for his help navigating the route. Alan and the children reach the end of the forest, and Alan first tests it with a piece of wood to make sure the wires are deactivated. He then tricks the children into thinking he's been electrocuted and tries to figure out how to get through the wires. Meanwhile, they hear dinosaurs roaring and rush to escape. Ellie hits a dead end following John's directions, and Ian intervenes, telling her to follow the wires she sees above her. Meanwhile, Alan and the children continue climbing the wires, reaching the top and then beginning their descent. Ellie finally finds the box and, following John's instructions, lowers and raises the lever, restarting the charge. Tim, who hasn't yet finished descending the wires, is startled by the sirens and nearly falls. Ellie then begins to turn on the power in each area by pressing the corresponding buttons. Realizing the power will be restored, Alan tells Tim to jump down quickly. Tim says he can't jump because he's scared. Alan says he'll hold him and counts down, but he can't convince him to jump. When Ellie activates the power there, the electricity hits Tim and hurls him towards Alan. Alan says he's not breathing. While Ellie is happy that the power is back on, she runs away screaming because a dinosaur sticks its head out from behind her. She tries to close the door and keep it that way. She goes to the corner, and when she sees Ray's torn arm falling on her, she starts running, even more terrified. However, the dinosaur rips the door open and chases after her. Ellie goes outside, closes the shed door, and sits down to cry. Robert is chasing one of the dinosaurs and stops at a spot where he can get a good look at it, takes off his hat and readies his gun. Just as he takes aim,
another dinosaur appears right next to him and pounces on him, then begins to eat him. Alan tries to revive Tim by giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and he finally succeeds. Tim begins coughing and breathing again.
Alan finally arrives at the headquarters with the children and sees no one inside. He sets Tim on the table, tries to reassure him, and tells them he'll find the others and come back, then leaves. When he goes out, he runs into Ellie and they hug. The children head for the food, and as they stuff themselves, they see the shadow of a dinosaur appear behind them. Terrified, they flee to the kitchen, turn off the lights, and hide in a corner. The dinosaur blows on the door's glass, peers in with its eyes, and acts as if it knows they're there. While Alan is armed, he learns from Ellie that there are 2 raptors and that the third one is contained. At this point, the raptors open the kitchen door, enter, and begin roaring. The children crawl to the other corner of the kitchen. They try to avoid the raptors' sight, and using the sound of their tails knocking over dishes, they quickly escape to the other corner. When one of the ladles Tim hits falls, one of the raptors climbs under the counter, and they both run to find Tim. At this moment, Lex makes a noise, attracting them and hiding in one of the cabinets. However, she struggles to close the door, but manages to escape the raptor since it mistakes her reflection on the other counter for the real her. Tim accelerates quickly to the freezer, luring the other raptor in pursuit. He manages to escape the raptor by taking advantage of the slippery ground, and with his sister's help, he gets out and locks the door on it. This time, they both escape the other raptor and run to Alan and Ellie, who have arrived there.
They all run to the control room. Ellie tries to reboot the system and activate the locks while Alan holds the door closed, only to see the raptor appear. The dinosaur manages to pull the door handle again and tries to get in. Ellie rushes to help hold the door shut, and Lex runs to the computer to complete Ellie's task. Meanwhile, Alan and Ellie try to reach the gun that has fallen to the floor, but they can't. The raptor manages to get its claw through the door and pushes it further. Lex tries to find the correct file on the computer. Just as Alan and Ellie manage to close the door on the dinosaur, Lex activates the system and tells them that all security equipment is activated. They immediately call John. Just as Alan tells them they're okay and to call for help, he hears the dinosaur approaching and fires at it. He abandons the jammed gun and climbs to the ceiling with the others. The raptor looks up, trying to figure out where they're going, and tries to knock Lex down, but Alan stops him by kicking it in the face. He pulls the girl up at the last moment and escapes with the others. When they reach the other side, they find themselves in the lobby, but the raptor doesn't let up and jumps onto the large dinosaur skeleton. As they spin, Alan slowly drops Tim to the ground. Lex's rope nearly breaks, but she lands safely. Ellie falls to the ground, trying to protect herself from the skeleton fragments that fall on her. When the main skeleton piece falls too, Alan is thrown aside. He then tries to make sure the children are okay. The raptor sticks its head up from where it fell and looks at them. Suddenly, 2 other raptors arrive, and they all trap them in the middle. Just as they're about to attack, the T-Rex arrives, hunts one of the raptors, and begins fighting another that jumps on it. Alan and the others take advantage of this opportunity to escape. They jump straight into John's vehicle, which has just arrived. The T-Rex angrily throws the raptor it was fighting onto the skeleton and roars powerfully. While everyone else boards the helicopter they've summoned, John wants to take one last look at his park. The helicopter continues its journey. Alan and the children fall asleep while Ellie watches them, and John watches the mosquito in his Boston. Alan then wakes up, and along with Ellie, watches a flock of birds flying right next to them. Our heroes continue on their way, and the story ends here.